Hello, Bricksters. We're so excited to have you all here. For all of you joining at home, welcome, welcome. We've got a couple more sessions left for you today. My name is Allison Baker. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here at Databricks, and I'd like to just run us through a couple more items that we have on the agenda for today. So we're going to be hearing from Lexi next, and she's going to take us through some AI strategy roadmaps, and then we're going to close out with Jason, who's going to show us how to elevate our SQL productivity working in notebooks and the SQL editor. So again, I'm really excited to introduce this next speaker. So Lexi is our lead data and AI strategist, and she's here today to help us elevate and accelerate our strategy with working with our business so that we can get our organizations up and going with AI and get everybody moving and grooving as quickly as possible. She's going to walk us through this workshop, show us how we can mitigate risk and align to our business strategies. So with that, I will throw it over to you, Lexi. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I know it's towards the end of the day, so thank you for being here. I'm really excited to present AI in motion. It's going to be a pretty interactive session, so bear that in mind. You're actually going to need your phones out for this. So this is the one time in the day where it's OK to be looking at your phone the whole time, with very few exceptions, but we'll get into that. I told you it's going to be a roadmap in 30 minutes. You may have noticed this is a 40-minute session. We will have time at the end, hopefully, for some questions. In the essence of saving time, very brief agenda. What are we doing? We're going to do the thing. Then we'll talk about what to do next, and then we'll go to questions. So why bother with strategy? So what's really interesting to me is that I've been doing data and AI strategy now for about 5 years. And it wasn't until this year that I started getting clients come to me to say, hey, can you talk to me specifically about an AI strategy? What can we do for AI? We talked about data strategy, we've talked about data governance, all these different things, but what about AI? And should we really have an AI strategy? Do we need this strategy, or is it just going to delay things? Well, I do recommend having a strategy, and I'm going to give an example of potentially why. So I live in the UK now, not that you can tell by my accent, and I'm in the process of getting my driving license there, which is a bit intimidating because there are things like this. This is what's called the magic roundabout. It is actually 7 roundabouts in one, which is super fun. Where I grew up, we called roundabouts rotaries. So if you know where that is, thanks, neighbor. What's interesting about something like this, in my driving lessons, my instructor tells me when you come to a roundabout, you need to have a plan. And this absolutely needs a plan. Because when you come into this, you can actually get into that roundabout either way. And you need to know where you're headed so that you can figure out your plan around the various little roundabouts that are within the roundabout. It's a crazy loop. So I say this because AI is very similar. We need a plan going in so that we actually get to the destination. Otherwise, we're stuck in the roundabout like, National Lampoon back in the day. So why have a plan? Why have a strategy? You probably heard during the keynote, and you've probably heard it in a couple other presentations, 85% of AI projects never get to production. You have to break out of the lab. So what's preventing this? And you've heard some of this before. First of all, having AI without data intelligence, meaning having AI that's generic, that uses models that are only using kind of public information, scraped from the web. It's not your own information. It doesn't tailor to your business or to your organization. And without that, you're not getting the value that you need. Which brings me on to an unclear path to value. If you don't have a sense of what a given project is going to get you, it's much less likely you're going to actually put it into production. And this is something we've seen over and over again with customers that start in the lab. They say, there's some really good stuff. We're able to put together models. And then somebody says, great, so what's it going to cost to put this into production, and what are we going to get from it? And the ROI just doesn't make sense. So you need to make sure that you have this path to value figured out before you get going. Next, of course, the other side of the balance is security. We talk about value and risk. Those are kind of the 2 big pillars. So making sure that you have an understanding of the security and governance needed specifically for AI. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But this is really one of the bigger factors that's hindering organizations from being able to move towards production. They may have a great candidate, they think there's value, but if the organization says there's too much risk here, you're still not going to get to production. And finally, scalability. This one is really tough because, again, those lab projects, they look great when somebody's using their laptop, and then you say, how does this scale to 10,000 people? How much is it going to cost us? Are they going to actually have a good experience? And suddenly that laptop project doesn't look so hot. So we need to make sure that we've got a plan going in of how we're going to evaluate so we get past all of these things. So today, we're going to do this simply. We're going to start simply to find where those areas of real value are so you can capitalize on your competitive advantage. You can ensure that your security and governance is up to snuff. You've got adoptable, trusted AI-based solutions, so meaning your business partners are actually willing to use them on an ongoing basis, that it will scale so that they can do that, and then, of course, planning for the culture change. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on that, fair warning. It's a big topic. We will touch on it just a little bit at the end. It's really important to make sure that we're bridging the gap between IT or data and the business and bringing them along on this journey, because it is a cultural change. All right. That's the whole intro. We're going to get into this real quick. So let's build a strategy. And we're going to do this by playing 20 questions. So just like there were 7 little mini roundabouts in the Magic Roundabout, by the way, that's in Swindon, and I'm never going to Swindon. There are 7 categories here. So we're going to go through, each of these categories has between 2 and 4 questions. And this is just a start, right? So it's not going to be everything you might ever want to consider in your strategy, but hopefully it gives you a sense. It's a good old Google form, so get out your phone, scan the QR code. Hopefully it's big enough that the folks in the back can get it. It is anonymous. You don't have to put your email address in. It won't go anywhere. If you do, it's just so that you can get a copy of what you put in. 20 questions, 5-point Likert scale. They're all the same, strongly disagree to strongly agree. All right. I'll give it just another minute. Hopefully it's pulled up. Somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see it. Fab. All right, first section. We're going to talk a little bit about business strategy. So in this one, for each of these ones, I want you to just indicate in there your amount of agreement with the statement, right? So you have our leadership actively champions and invests in AI initiatives. We prioritize productivity gains over exploring new growth opportunities. Automation of as many processes as possible is key to our strategy. And we rigorously evaluate the expected value and business case of AI initiatives before prioritizing them. I'll give you a moment to answer some of those. I'll chatter a little bit about why these are important. All right, I see some people looking up. So making sure that your leadership is engaged and championing these efforts is critical. We have to make sure that the need for AI and the opportunity it provides is heard from the top all the way through the organization, because it can be scary, right? We need to understand as an organization how we're moving forward and where we fit in that. It's really important. The investment side equally so, right? We talked about the scalability. We talked about the fact that these can be, heavily invested programs, and that the change management to support it will also need investment. So these are things that our leadership needs to provide and support as we keep going. Prioritizing productivity gains over exploring new growth opportunities. For what it's worth, there are no wrong answers here. The interesting thing with this one is I've heard organizations say AI is going to be the thing that we're going to drive new revenue lines from versus we're going to get efficiencies. We're looking to make sure that we get our 30% reduction in cost, right? There's no wrong answer. If both are on the table and equally important, pick the middle value, right? Automation. This one's another one where, again, when you hear automation, a lot of people immediately think, oh my gosh, job displacement, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but there are things that we need to consider when we say automation is really important versus human augmentation. And then this last one, number 4, is really a foundational piece. Prioritization, this is where value comes from, identifying where you can actually get value in your organization. So we'll talk a little bit about this towards the end, but especially on item 2, productivity and growth, this starts to key into where your first roadmap items could be. All right, next section. We're gonna move fast because we only have 30 minutes. Buy versus build. There are a lot of different things on the table here, right? Buy versus build, we're looking at, do we intend to only develop AI aligned to core business differentiators? And do our current teams possess the necessary skills and expertise to build, maintain, and monitor AI solutions? Now, in this, it doesn't necessarily say, do we buy and configure? Do we shift this over time? This is more generic, right? Give these two a go, and we'll keep moving. What's interesting about the core business differentiators here is that there are kind of two schools of thought. One says, we need to exploit our current advantage. We want to make sure that we're really taking advantage of all the data we've collected over the years. We're entrenching in our industry. There's another side of the house that says, actually, we want to expand into new things, exploration kind of territory, right? So again, no wrong answer here, but it can influence where you decide to put your investments in AI and how that then gets measured over time. All right, next up, culture and people. This one is huge, right? The only way to get scalable value is if people actually use AI. So, a couple of things. First one on culture. So, are you empowered to ignore strategic directives from leadership when speed is tantamount? Meaning, you have a strategy that says you should be building things in-house, but it's going to take a while. So does the business have the latitude and potentially the budget to ignore that and say, actually, we're going to go buy something and bring it in? This plays back into that build versus buy conversation. So think about how that would happen in your organization. The next one is data and AI fluency is promoted and developed in all areas and levels. Meaning it's not just the data team, it's not just the marketing team, because that's often kind of the business counterparts that really love it. It's not just R&D. They're another one that are typically pretty good with this. All areas and all levels. And we have a strong culture of experimentation and iteration. So what happens if you don't? Well, it means more upskilling, and it means a different style of engaging with the business to bring them on what is an iterative journey. AI isn't perfect, right? We see that all the time. So how do we make sure that we're showcasing the potential to the business without scaring them off, right? We don't want them to see one hallucination and go running for the hills. These are fixable problems, but they need to partner with us. So it takes a slightly different approach. All right. Next two. I mean, if you figured it out already, you can move through these in the Google form without my clicking the slides. So you're welcome to do that too, at your own pace. All right, AI democratization. So 2 questions here. The first one, we intend to integrate AI broadly across functions and departments. So this is how widely are you going to be using AI in your organization? And the second is we intend to have AI be owned and developed across teams and business functions. So this is more than just using it. This is who's actually owning it. Who has the responsibility to make sure that these tools are correct for use, that they're valid, that they're delivering value over time, and that they may even be developed by those teams. What's interesting here is as we start to, we're going to get into another section shortly about governance, but there's a really key tie-in here between the ownership piece. Because in data governance, typically, the business owns the data, right? They're the ones that manage those systems in terms of the contract. They're the ones that understand what's right and wrong in the data. More often than not, they provide that insight, but they're the ones that own it. And with AI, we're seeing a similar trend. The AIs that people are building or using or buying are owned by the business. So we want to make sure that we have an understanding of how much they're ready to do that. All right, next up. For anybody who's coming in late, you can scan the QR, hopefully. All right, risk and governance. I said we were going to get to this one. So 4 items here. It is a big topic. So our risk appetite around AI is clearly defined and communicated. We have clearly identified those responsible for overseeing AI governance, not AI ownership, AI governance. We understand and implement principles of responsible AI, and we are confident in our ability to identify and mitigate the unique risks inherent to AI. So here, we're talking about a broader set of stakeholders that are involved in AI governance. And typically what we see is that there are AI governance boards convened that include stakeholders from risk, compliance, legal, data, AI, the business, and other areas to ensure that the right scrutiny is placed on AI solutions. So if you're looking at who is responsible for overseeing this, how are they engaged? Do they have a set of principles for responsible AI by which they're going to look at and evaluate new solutions? This is where you want to look for those opportunities. All right. Next up, platform and tools. I can't be standing up here as a representative of Databricks and not talk about the platform. So it is really important. So are you confident in the quality and accessibility of your data for developing AI solutions? We've heard about data as the oxygen, the fuel, the oil, whatever you want to say. Can you get it? Is it good quality? Is it refined? Is it available? How's your data looking? Is your data and AI platform set up to support the development and scaling of AI solutions? So if you are going to build or you're going to host your AI solutions, how ready are you to do that from a technical perspective? And then are you prepared to integrate new AI capabilities into existing systems and solutions? One of the interesting things we talk about what happens when you can't get to production. What getting to production means is not always standing up a net new interface. More often than not, we're looking at how do we integrate these new AI capabilities into the workflows we already have, into the tools that our users are already familiar with. One of the first things we started to hear when we first launched Genie was, is there an API for that we can put in something else, please? We don't want to have to go into the Databricks environment to see Genie, but we think it's a great tool. Why? Because we want our users to be in the flow of their work. We want them to be able to use these things, but without having to come out into a separate environment, do some context switching, try and find what they're looking for. So how do we integrate this means how do we engage with software developers, application developers, potentially build some Databricks apps, as you heard maybe today, to integrate this into tools that your users actually already have in their hands and make it easier for them to adopt. Again, adoptable, trusted solutions. So that means a different style of working, potentially, with some of the teams that own your other platforms, like ERPs, CRMs, and so forth. All right. The last 2 questions, measurement and tracking. Do you consistently define and measure the success metrics for AI projects once they're deployed? Meaning, after you've done the prioritization, you already thought this is the business case we're going to go towards, how are you validating that you're achieving it? And the last question, we monitor our AI systems for performance and reliability. So that includes technical and qualitative reliability and performance. That's anything from the latency you're experiencing to is the answer still valid, right? So back in the ML days, we would talk about model degradation, but it's still pertinent, right? You still have the opportunity here to say, well, over time, our processes are changing with AI. Are the things that we're providing still valid? Are they still useful? That's the kind of reliability we're looking for. All right, so when you get to the end of this, the QR code, there is a link to a document that has a lot of interpretation. It's about 20 pages long. So you can download that, and it has more of what happens if you agree or disagree. But as a starting point, when you look at how you've answered these questions, this is a strong framework for the start of your strategy, right? Looking at where are you trying to invest? How is it going to come to fruition? Are you able to provide value? Do you know you're going to be able to get to production? And how are you going to move that through over time? All right. That's the tough part. But a goal without a plan is just a wish. So how do we turn this into something that we can execute on? A few things. There are several items in here, and if you download the document, it notes which ones are foundational. Prioritize the necessary foundations. These include things like the business case articulation, prioritizing for value, access to data and the quality of that data, right? You heard about all the amazing things that we're doing with Unity Catalog, the governance and quality that you're able to get from having a platform that connects data and AI. And that's incredibly helpful when you look at your data access and governance throughout the lineage of your AI lifecycle. AI governance planning, including all of the people that need to be involved, and ideally trying to automate some of the processes that they would go through so you're not just waiting for a quarterly committee to convene. That's one of the areas where I will say it gets a little muddy. So try to find ways that some of the things that we're trying to do here can be automated. And identify your paths to scale. That includes the platform, it includes the people, it includes coordination and collaboration across the business and IT. All right, next up, identify low-hanging fruit aligned to your business strategy. So there are certain areas, I mentioned a couple of them a moment ago, where there are potentially more engaged owners. But really what you want to be looking for is how can you facilitate this kind of internal and external application of AI, meaning if you're looking at trying to expand, you prioritize growth rather than efficiency. It's more of an external focus. How do you bring new customers or prospects into the mix to identify what solutions they would want, right? Like a product manager would. How do you think about opening up new market for yourselves? If it's an internal focus, this is more on the productivity gains. Right? So this is around how do you engage with the business to understand their workflows better so you build things that actually help them and they will use. They'll take advantage of these things and actually build those in. So these are trying to find owners that will help with that. Articulate your build versus buy criteria. This one is an interesting challenge right now because we're seeing a tremendous proliferation of up-and-coming new tools. How many people here have heard their business talking about some AI company that reached out to them and really thinks they should adopt their solution right this second? Yeah. It's coming up. And what's interesting is that a lot of these organizations, they come up and they say, oh, you don't have to give us any data. You don't have to integrate anything, right? It's totally out of the box, ready to go. We all know that's not right, okay? We know there's going to be some configuration needed. We talked about that at the start. Data intelligence is important. So make sure that you're communicating to your business counterparts the buy versus build criteria, how they can help to evaluate new vendors that are coming to them saying, hey, we've got a great solution. We really think that this is going to benefit you. And make sure that there's an understanding of how data will need to be used to support either of those options. All right, enhance your AI security posture. Almost everyone is nervous about what's this going to do for data? Can I protect the data? Can I protect my IP? How do I govern? How do I secure? What I will say, our Databricks AI security framework got an update earlier this year. It's got a 2.0 version. Take a look at that. It's aligned to several other industry standard AI security frameworks. It's a great place to start. And make sure that you're communicating that and providing these kinds of resources to others in your organization so that they can understand what controls, what risk mitigations are available, so that as you start to have these conversations about AI governance, as you start to consider new tools that are coming into the market that you might want to take advantage of, they have a better understanding of what they could do or what they should be asking of vendors to actually ensure that they're going to secure the firm. And finally, bring the business into the process. What's really interesting over the last year or so since we started doing the previews with Genie is the way that it's connected the data teams and the business teams. Because as you start to work together in a data room like Genie, you realize that the instructions that Genie needs to support the questions that the business is going to ask come from the business. So as a data team, you construct the framework, you give them the room, but really what you're there to do is help in those few occasions where you have to translate the question to, oh, I know how we usually answer that in SQL. I'll put that SQL in, you put the question in. And you can collaborate in these environments in a way that makes the business part of the development cycle. It's really crucial to make sure that they're engaged, they're seeing that it gets better over time, right? This is incredibly important to make sure they're actively participating. All right. Finally, I said I'm going to mention change management. Plan for change. It's happening anyway. So some key tenets of change management. I told you I'm not going to do a ton on this because it could be an entire lecture on its own. Have a vision of how you anticipate change manifesting and rolling out across the organization. It's really important. Even more so, communicate that vision again and again. Some of the most successful CDOs I've spoken with over the last several months said that their first key hire when they came into a new role was a comms person. Why? Two things: change management and value articulation. How do you sing from the hilltops how well your team is doing and the value you're delivering to the business? You have to be able to communicate that. So if you don't have that person, find someone who can help you in the organization to do that. It helps to get supporters on your side. And then there's all of the other kind of grassroots efforts that you do for that. That starts to build the narrative of success. From there, empower, educate, and train. Make sure that you're giving the people that you're working with the tools, the skills, information, continual reinforcement, and again, celebrate those wins. So as soon as you've got something to shout about, shout it out loud. And then repeat, right? Iteration drives innovation. And we've always had this, right? I'm a recovering data scientist. Back in the day, we talked about how the cycle of data science never really ends. It just iterates. AI is the same way, right? It will improve, but you've got to iterate and keep them on that journey with you. All right. That's it. Questions?